Hello, everyone. Thanks for coming. Welcome to Writers and Books Visiting Author Series. My name is Dan Hurd. I'm the Director of Adult Programs. Writers and Books is a nonprofit literary center in Rochester, New York. We offer readings, creative writing workshops, and other literary programming for people of all ages and backgrounds, all available online currently. For more information and to see our upcoming events, visit our website at wab.org. Tonight, we're so happy to have Rage Hezekiah with us tonight, reading from her debut collection, Stray Harbor. It's available in our bookstore, Ampersand Books. I'll have the link put in the chat. First, we'll hear from Rage, and then she'll be in conversation with the poet July Westhale. Feel free to add comments or ask questions in the chat or the Q&A function. Rage Hezekiah is a New England-based poet and educator who has received fellowships from Cave Canem, MacDowell, and the Ragdale Foundation, and is a recipient of the St. Botolph Foundation's Emerging Artist Award. Her chapbook, Unslakable, is a 2018 Vella Chapbook Award winner. As the writer Clint Smith says, Stray Harbor is a collection that helps us remember what it is like to discover the world for the first time. It's a tender meditation on how we learn to love our family and how we learn to love ourselves. Rage Hezekiah has given us a stunning debut, one that signals that we're only at the beginning of what promises to be a remarkable literary life. Rage is also teaching an online workshop this Saturday called Slaying Shame and Bringing Wholeness to the Page. I'll put a link in the chat as well. But Rage, thank you for being here.
I'm so grateful to be here. Thanks so much, Dan, for having me, and July for being with us. I look forward to chatting with you. I'm grateful to be here, and I'm going to read a few poems from Stray Harbor, and then thinking about shame, I'm going to try to read some of the work, some of my newer work as well, that's kind of grappling with the theme of shame. So I'm going to start with the first poem in the book. And it's called Tenderness. Temperance. At 6, I craved the clash of glass, my want electric and unslakable, for the shattering sound like a fissure, familiar. My mother broke dishes, drunk with rage, flung ceramic onto the cement from our back porch, her laughter punishing the silence of no one to blame. I'd wait and pitch her abandoned bottles, wet and lipsticked, onto the pavement. I stood above a broken meadow, awaiting fresh wreckage. Dad cracked walls, hurled furniture, whatever nouns his hands found. He pulled my bedroom door clean off its hinges to find me cowering behind a vacant frame. In my parents' final fight, they emerged from the basement, streaked with ancient paint, wearing evidence of an explosion. Both marked our hardwood floor with ghostly footprints, a subtle tutorial in Inanimous. This is a poem where every time I read it, somebody comes up to me afterwards and was like, the same thing happened to me, which has been so healing to me in writing this book that grapples a lot with family trauma, alcoholism, and I think part of why I write is because it helps me move through some of the things that I experienced, especially as a young person, but also today, that felt like very isolated experiences to me. And the more I write those things, the more I find out how connected I am with other people. So this is called Seeing My Father's Penis. My father stood, and the black horn of himself slipped through the fly of his boxers in our Floridian hotel room. Flaccid, it looked like a mistake, gathered and external, accidental. He was oblivious, walking between the queen beds, while my sister and I sat giggling in Disney pajamas. This part was not what I expected. Dark skin folded under vulnerable skin at the apex of his legs. At 8, my mind conjured a pink cartoon, the relic of an animated film I borrowed from my local library. The white women kept my cards stored in a small plastic box behind the children's desk. I loved watching their manicured hands flicking through the cardstock dividers, fetching something only mine. The laminated card I'd signed with amateur skill birthed a new freedom, my young mind teeming with too many questions. I was ravenous for answers like a wolf pup seeking carrion. In the room with my father, I had too long to inspect his body, understood him knowing would mean shame. Rosie and I hid under quilted covers, wordless and quaking with nervous laughter. We took turns peeking out from beneath our homemade fort, confirming it was still there, hanging in the air, an apology. Keeping up appearances. In the tradition of stiff drinks and troughs of white wine, we've been trained to deny, to remain in the realm of I am fine. I unlearn the familiar good, good, good of our Caribbean grandfather and forget how to answer, how are you? Practice saying well, focus on my health. I tell you I'll do anything, in part to dismantle the guilt of leaving you too long with a drowning mother. She's offered vague apologies before for things she won't remember and we can't forget. In sobriety, she believes a single trip to the confessional where she tells of her abortion absolves it all. We are the ones she kept. I wear a $300 dress at your wedding, shoes and jewels that match the sea breeze swatch you've carried in your clutch for months. You coordinated every decoration with desperate precision, an effort to control something tangible. 20 years ago at family events, we kids tried to hide the cassette tape, attempted to prevent the part where all the adults cut loose to that B-52's album. Our mother and her brothers, ruddy and sweating, clothes specked with the wet of spilled rum, puddles on the hardwood. What if we tried to stop them because it made us unbearably sad? So I'm going to read a few. I started a project last summer, specifically writing into my young sexuality and thinking about the messages that I got about my body and becoming a woman and about sex as a young person. And those poems were really hard to publish, I think in part because they were they were kind of extra. And so there's a couple of them in the book, but I'm going to read some of the newer ones as well. And that's part of why I was drawn to teaching this workshop as well, because I think that thinking about and talking about especially like young sexuality, like the questions that I had about my body as a young person, or trying to figure out how to interact with other people's bodies, I think was really uncomfortable and confusing. And so, yeah, thinking about trying to write into that space has been a really interesting journey for me. So this is a poem that I wrote about the night I graduated college. It's called Brooklyn. Under indeterminate sky, rudderless, we lie on a city rooftop and fuck each other unconscious, not sorry about our volume, our unwashed skin. We're stoned, irreverent, unafraid of consequence. Tomorrow, you leave for California. As you sleep, I watch you breathe, the seesaw of our shared respiration, my inhale, your exhale, breath's metronome. Before departure, we wash our laundry in the shower, fill the tub with ripped jeans, smelling of patchouli and cedar, a dose of Dr. Bronner's soap. We agitate suds with our feet as though we're stomping grapes into wine. Tell me we'll always be this young, that you're my cure. We can stay dazed, directionless, refusing what we have, what we've been given, reluctant to take anything by the reins. So I'm going to read some newer poems now. Continuing on that sexuality series. This is called I Grab You Hard. I grab you hard to show my power while I suck your dick in the leather back seat of my cousin's BMW. Parked on a dim street behind a gay bar in LA, we fumble drunk. You melt into submission while I coach you towards climax, my wet mouth sealed against your skin. I make you quiver, tease your pleasure's edge. You beg permission before you come. Do you swallow? I want your praise, but not to please you. Your cock slips from my lips while confusion penetrates your face. You are bare and hard and wanting. I am suddenly disarmed. On vacation. We weren't fooling anyone, rehearsing neutral faces, hands down each other's pants in the minivan's backseat. I practiced tight-fisted motion while your parents drove. You carried spare boxers in your backpack, slipped into gas station bathrooms to peel off sticky underwear. I laid a pillow on my lap and soaked my shorts. Your thick fingers plunged into new wet. I squirmed silent, channeling electricity in my abdomen. I handled you in hot tubs and hallways, empty corners of state park cabins, splintered with old wood. And then when I was trying to publish those poems, the rejection letters that I was getting were so relentless, as rejection letters are. But I think that the because I was writing about these things that I hadn't written about before, the rejection felt so much more personal than it had when I was writing, you know, things that were easier to write about. So this next poem is a found poem from all the rejection letters that I was getting, from all the rejection letters that I've gotten for many, many moons. But this is called Not For Us. Not for us. We have carefully considered, we have decided against, we've decided not to accept. We decided not to take, we decided to pass. We're going to pass, we'll have to pass, we must pass. We regret, we must decline. We will not be taking, won't be taking, will not likely accept. We cannot accept, can't accept, are not accepting. We don't feel it is right, not cohesive enough, not quite suited, not quite right, not right for us, not the right fit, not a fit, not quite a fit. No, not now, didn't quite land, doesn't fit, do not fit, didn't feel quite right, didn't fit, just right, isn't a good fit, didn't feel it, wasn't right, wasn't chosen, wasn't a fit, does not work, does not meet our needs, does not fit the needs, do not meet our current needs, best wishes. We wish you the best. We wish you luck, best of luck elsewhere. I just have 2 more poems. This is called Siam Delight. You've nodded out at dinner again, having just used or needing more, the shell of you collapsing. I want to trust your alphabet of lies, my denial, a cardigan pulled over brown shoulders. I console you like a mother. I know, love, I know. At the Thai restaurant, I push slippery noodles and steamed vegetables around my plate. Watch you bob, a broken machine, your slow motion hand torpid towards your fork. You can't seem to find your mouth, so I flag down our waitress who pretends not to notice you're boneless. She presses our leftovers into neat white boxes, a perfect fit. Outside, August marinates our skin, evaporates my compassion. I stand under streetlights in a yellow dress, fling expletives at you. Wet artillery rolls off your shrugging shoulders. You are enemy, slumped into yourself, an accident. I want to push you into traffic, make you disappear until I remember you want that too. This last poem is called Mercury in Cancer. Thanks so much for listening. Swallowtails hover above bee balm. I think Ouroboros, all in balance. July again, warm fade of days edging toward September. The woodchuck unearths himself, decimates our heirloom tomatoes. I watch a brandywine plump and ripen. When I beckon my wife to the vine to show her what we've grown together, the creatures gnashed it open, dark pink writhing with earwigs. I'm forever unpregnant. Who could be fertile in this time of loss? I'm made to hate my own wanting, a snake swallowing its own tail. Thank you.
It's so incredible to be in conversation with you, and especially in this format, because I can't see who else is here. So I feel like I'm having a private reading, which is really a true delight. Thank you for that. This collection is so beautiful and has been such an oceanic place for me to be in the last week of getting to spend time with it. I feel really lucky. And I also just want to say that it's really good for my heart and the other writers who are here tonight probably to hear this composition of rejection letters. So you've done us all such a great service. Thank you.
Thanks so much.
So the first thing that I really noted that took me into your work, and I have noticed through reading reviews and reading interviews with you that this is a common occurrence, is this mouthfeel of sounds that you have in your work. And they're a kind of code that feel sonically based. I'm thinking about these particular pairings that sound like what they are. So a couple of examples I have is in the poem Temperance, which kicks off the book, you have fresh wreckage. And then in the poem Kitchen Children, you have like birds, like bonsai. And My Father Swimming, surrender, fierceness. So it kind of begets this question about your relationship with the phonics of language and how that informs the work that you do.
Wow, that's such a lovely question. Thanks for that question. Yeah, I feel I think something that I learned about my work and about my obsession with language is like so much of it is how it feels in my mouth. How it feels in my mouth. I think words are so delicious. And I think something that I really had to kind of pull back from when I was, really working on craft in grad school was, I would write these poems that were just like, that were so sonically driven, but were just like meaningless, they were just like words. And so I think that I'm continuing to learn a lot about, how to meld what is happening sonically with meaning. And also I think getting more effective with editing and more comfortable with that pulling back, like even when I'm in love with the way something sounds, having to really think about like, well, does the poem need that? And is that necessary? And if it serves it sonically, can that also potentially take away from, the quality of the line or what's happening in other places? So it's something that I continue to really work on, and something that I just love in other people's work. I do a lot of like reading poems out loud to myself in the bath, which I feel like, being a kid and like singing in the bath and just like being playful and having words be so like bodily feels really familiar to me and like homey to me. So I'm grateful that that it comes through in the work.
I think there's something really resonant about that. The fact that it was one of the first things that struck me, and also I thought to myself, I wonder if this person reads poems out loud. And the fact that it shows up in so many other people's impressions of your work, I think speaks to this understanding, this innate connection we have to the way, to alliteration, to rhyme and meter, to sound, and the way that it connects with us physically. I mean, kids' poems do that so much, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, something that I've been thinking about, one of the things, for in the last 9 months for me is like I'm working from home, so I just have more space to read. And so I'm reading a lot more about craft. And before I started, I feel like I came to poetry really late. I didn't really study poetry. I didn't study poetry at all as an undergrad. And so when I got to grad school, I felt like I was surrounded by people who could really talk and think about meter and syllabics and what's a trochee and what's a dactyl. And I still, I don't have that language, and I'm trying to learn it now because it feels like maybe something that could be helpful to me. But it does feel like learning a foreign language. It feels really counterintuitive to me. And I think the thing about my own relationship with language is yeah, it feels very bodily and intuitive. And there's something about meter and syllabics that makes me feel like I'm getting it wrong. Like I have to really be like, where is the stress? Like maybe I don't even know what a stress syllable is. So it is kind of like, it's interesting to be intentional about trying to do that learning at this point.
Yeah, they're two different kind of planes, right?
Yeah, super different.
Um, Allison from the audience says, I love the newest poems you read tonight. While brilliantly crafted, they seem somehow more unrestrained than the poems you read from the collection, freer, revelatory, and fresh images.
So loving, thank you.
Yeah, I agree with that. And it's great that you brought up the body, because I was going to say that so much of the language feels so embodied. And it feels like that's what the collection is truly in conversation with, is this connection between a sensory perspective of the world and how it kind of comes into the body. And there are a lot of visceral moments. We actually associate the word visceral with the body so frequently. And I would love to hear what the rendering was like for you to bring something like the philosophy of poetry into the enacted, or so root it into the experience of the flesh.
That's such an interesting question. Yeah, and I don't know that I have a great answer. I mean, I think that when I was thinking about putting this collection together, I'm so impressed by people who like have a book project and kind of like write into a certain space. And for me, I had all these poems, and it was like so trying to find what common themes existed in the work. I think I am I think that bodies is like probably one of my top 3 obsessions. I think alcoholism and addiction is up there, bodies and sexuality. And so I think that as a writer, having this kind of like hamster wheel, like Rubik's cube of the thing that I'm constantly kind of like turning over and obsessing about and trying to look at in a new way. I think, I think that I'm still learning so much about my own body and my interaction with bodies. I think I have like a lot of unanswered questions and things I'm exploring. But I think, starting to bring these poems to the page and I mean, I'll be really transparent in this moment. Like I've been in this fertility journey for about 2 years now, and it has been, I think I'm learning so much new information about like the relationship I have with my body. And this last poem I read is like, you know, that line, I'm forever unpregnant, like being able to say that aloud, and having other poets who I know who are writing into those spaces, you know, it feels like peeling the onion. It's like opening up new spaces. um it's interesting because when I was writing Stray Harbor, I started Stray Harbor in 2012. And so was already in this journey of like thinking about what it might be like to be, to have a child. And so now thinking about that bodily piece, in the present and trying to write into that space is like totally different territory. And so, yeah, it's lots and lots of continued learning for sure.
Thank goodness it's different territory, you know?
Yeah.
I think if you were to answer the question of the body, then you would have to have a different relationship with one of your obsessions, and that is hard. There's a kind of grief in that.
Totally.
We do have a question from the audience. It looks like it's a pal of yours. I think Pi is the way that their name is pronounced.
Oh, Pi.
Hey, Rage. I was wondering what your revision process looks like, especially when your work is so sonically resonant. Does the visceral language come first in drafting or more in revision? Sending love from Bennington.
So sweet. Hi, Pi. So the question was about what is happening sonically, and does that happen in the revision process? Yeah, I mean, I think some of it happens in the drafting process. I do a lot of, when I'm revising a poem, I tend to start off writing on the page, and then type the poem, and then in my revision process, I read it and record it, and I listen to it without looking at it. So I think that some of the changes that need to be made for sound reasons, I think I can kind of hear in that process. And I don't know, you know, like I'm obsessive for sure. There's a poem that I was working on a few days ago where I had a line and I put them like on two, and it was just like 2 words that were switched, and I put them on Post-its on the wall. You know, I read them out loud a bunch of times. I like lived with them in my space for a really long time to be like, what does that sound like? What does that sound like? You know, like I think it's especially sonically, I feel like that's probably what I'm most obsessive about in my revision process. It's really the sounds in poetry that give me the most pleasure, I think. Yeah, that embodied experience of being able to read a poem and feel it sonically feels so meaningful to me, and so I feel like I'm always trying to figure out how to do that effectively on the page.
Do you have a memory of when you felt that kind of sonic connection to a poem for the first time, or maybe not the first time, but the first time it really resonated with you?
So there are a couple things that come to mind. And it's interesting because it's not, so very early, probably like in sixth grade or something, we read like Romeo and Juliet for the first time, like hearing Shakespeare. I think we were like reading it aloud in class or something. And I still have this copy of this book that's just this like Shakespeare tome. And when I was in eighth grade, I used to I was like a goth weirdo. I was like light a bunch of candles and like lay on my bedroom floor and like read Macbeth aloud to myself. So I think that kind of obsession with how it sounded and the language. I think Shakespeare was probably one of the first places where I found that.
That laying on the bedroom floor, reading Macbeth aloud and like being a goth sounds so much like eighth grade.
I had Lady Macbeth's soliloquy on my windows in a dry erase marker. It was a deep, dive.
I mean, one of the first people who knew like really how to wash her hands.
Yeah, right. She nailed it. She hit it out of the park.
Just channel her. Just channel Lady Macbeth. I wanted to speak to this really startling and stunning moment in the poem about seeing your father's body, where you said something that I'm not going to get exactly right, but I had too long to look at my father's body. And it occurred to me when I was reading that, because it's such an incredible line, and it does this thing that I love in poetry, which is when the poet slightly turns outward to address the situation at hand, which is like the audience and the fact that this is a poem construction. But I think of poetry often as being an art form that does look too long, and does look too long either with shamelessness or without shame. And I'm wondering what that means for you, this idea of looking too long, like what it means in the context of that poem, and if it does apply to a broader sense of your own work, the way you think about poems.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that, thinking about the collection as a whole, I think that I really, it was a book that I needed to write as far as my own healing process. I used to joke in grad school about my mission was to not write about birch trees. And I wrote a shit ton of birch tree poems before, before I was ready to bring some real stuff to the page. And I think that part of that too, one of the interesting things about publishing the book is having my family see it and read it and have their own feelings about those things. And so I think that, as far as taking too long to look, I feel like in some ways I was really, steeped in the trauma of growing up in an alcoholic and abusive home. And I'm so grateful now to be willing to, I think in a lot of recovery communities that the language that gets used is to look back without staring. And the awareness that we can be aware of things that are troubling and painful and fill us with grief, and also be willing to move forward and heal. and recover. So I think that, yeah, being able to write, present poems, like actually being awake enough in my own life, in my own reality to reflect on things that are happening, and not an unwillingness to continue to make sense of things that have happened in the past, but also the desire to move forward feels pretty important.
Yeah. We have another question from the audience, from Michael. Hi, Michael. Rach, your ability to hold the other people in your poems in their full complexity, never flattening them to caricature or dismissing them, is stunning. Do you begin poems with this tenderness in spirit, or does it evolve as you write them? That is written like a true double Pisces. Thanks, Michael.
Michael's such a dear. Thanks,
I know.
Michael. Oh, just a gem. That's such a good question. I mean, like that, I really appreciate that question, because I feel like I want that tenderness and that compassion to come through in my poems, but the people I'm writing about are certainly not always going to feel that way. The poem Keeping Up Appearances that I read, that kind of talks about alcoholism, I really struggled with my mom when I was publishing this book, because she wanted me to take it out. She felt like I was sharing things that weren't mine to share. And I was like, that poem's about alcoholism. and my experience of alcoholism, my experience of growing up in an alcoholic home. And so, yeah, I'm like writing about, writing about and thinking about the legacy of abuse in Black families too, like just, the fact that my dad was hit and his parents are hit and were hit and he hit me. I think that, it's hard to know when I write those things if that tenderness comes through. But I think that part of my own healing has definitely just been like thinking about the way that my parents were raised, and just the way that things like abuse and alcoholism and addiction get carried through family systems, and that's nobody's fault. Like everybody does the best they can with the tools they have, and I really want that tenderness to exist. That tenderness is reflective of who I want to be in the world, and it's also not reflective of who I always am in the world. And I'm grateful to like be continuing on a healing journey, in part through showing up to being a writer.
What a beautiful and gracious answer. I know we're reaching the end of time, which is too bad, because I feel like I could have this conversation for hours. I want to just check in with folks in the room and see if there are any last minute burning questions that you can type in the Q&A. And while we're waiting for those, I just want to say that the presence with which you show up to your poems and the presence with which you show up to conversation about poetry, I think is super impactful and feels like a real gift, especially when it's been such a dark time. So I'm super grateful to be in conversation with you.
Yeah, thank you so much, and thanks for your generous questions. It's been really lovely to chat with you.
Thank you. I don't think we have any more questions. I'm not sure if Dan's going to come on and say goodbye. Looks like he is.
Hey,
Hey.
thank you so much. Thank you, Rage. Thank you, July. Everyone, thank you for coming. Buy Stray Harbor at Ampersand Books. The link is in the chat. Sign up for her workshop this Saturday. It'll be a great time. Yeah, thank you so much for coming and have a good night.
Yeah, thank you all so much. Have a great night. Take care.
Thank you, everyone.